The afternoon sun was blazing over the streets of Los Angeles, shining brightly through the large glass windows of the local bank branch. Inside, the air was cool and crisp, conditioned to perfection, but the mood was far from comfortable. It was a busy Tuesday, which meant the line of customers was long and moving at a snail's pace. People were tired, anxious to get back to their jobs or their homes, and the air was filled with the sounds of shuffling feet, the beep of machines, and quiet, frustrated sighs. Standing near the middle of the line was a man who looked like any other customer in the city. He wore a simple, dark hoodie, a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes, and worn-out jeans. To the average person glancing over, he was just another guy waiting to deposit a check. But if anyone looked closely, they would recognize the face of Keanu Reeves. He stood quietly, holding a deposit slip in one hand, his posture relaxed. He didn't look at his phone like everyone else. Instead, he observed the people around him. He had a calm demeanor, a gentle silence that made him seem content to just wait his turn. At the very front of the line, near the large service counters, stood a woman named Elena. She was older, perhaps in her 60s, and it was immediately clear that she was struggling. Elena suffered from a severe tremor in her hands, a condition that made simple tasks incredibly difficult. She walked with a heavy limp, leaning heavily on a silver cane that shook slightly under her weight. Her clothes were clean but old, and she wore a sweater that had seen better days. She looked fragile and nervous, her eyes darting around the busy bank as if she felt she didn't belong there. When the bank teller finally called for the next person, Elena stepped forward with great effort. It took her a moment to steady herself at the counter. Behind the thick glass sat a young man with a neatly trimmed beard and a name tag that read Steve. Steve looked like he was in a hurry. He didn't make eye contact with Elena at first. He just typed rapidly on his keyboard and stared at his screen. "Can I help you?" Steve asked, his voice flat and impatient. He didn't look up. Elena reached into her purse with shaking hands. Her movements were jerky and uncoordinated. She was trying to pull out her wallet, but her fingers refused to cooperate. The purse slipped slightly from her lap, and she had to grab the edge of the counter to keep from falling over. I need to take out money," Elena stammered. Her speech was slow and slurred, a result of her condition. She spoke softly, her voice trembling almost as much as her hands. Steve sighed loudly. It was an exaggerated, dramatic sigh that echoed in the quiet space around the counter. He finally looked up, but there was no kindness in his eyes. He looked annoyed, as if Elena was purposely making his day difficult. "Ma'am, do you have your card?" He snapped, tapping his pen on the glass counter. Elena nodded. Yes, just one moment." She tried to unzip a small pocket in her purse, but her hands were shaking too violently to grip the small zipper tab. She let out a small, frustrated noise, trying to hide her embarrassment. Behind Elena, the line of customers began to grow restless. Someone tapped their foot loudly. Another person checked their watch and huffed. The pressure of the crowd made Elena's hands shake even more. She dropped a coin from her purse, and it rolled across the polished floor. Making a loud pinging sound, Steve rolled his eyes so hard it looked like they might get stuck. He leaned closer to the microphone and said loudly and clearly, "Is this going to take all day? There are a lot of people waiting, you know." A few people in the line snickered. It was a cruel sound. Elena's face turned bright red. She could feel everyone staring at her. She wanted to disappear. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I am trying." Finally, she managed to pull out her bank card. She tried to slide it into the card reader, but her hand missed the slot. The card fell onto the counter. Steve didn't pick it up. He just stared at her. "You put it in the machine, ma'am." "Not on the counter." I can't," Elena said, tears welling up in her eyes. "My hands, they don't work." Steve laughed. It wasn't a kind laugh. It was a mocking laugh meant for his coworker sitting next to him. "Well, if your hands don't work, maybe you shouldn't be here alone. You're holding up the line. Look at the time." The tension in the bank was thick, while some customers looked away uncomfortably, checking their phones to pretend they didn't see the cruelty. Others joined in with Steve's impatience. "Just let her go already," a man in a business suit shouted from 5 spots back. Keanu Reeves, standing calmly in the middle of the line, narrowed his eyes. He had been watching the interaction with a growing sense of disbelief. He saw the look of pure humiliation on Elena's face. He saw the way the teller was using his position of power to bully someone who couldn't fight back. Keanu didn't say anything yet, but his relaxed posture stiffened. He wasn't just a bystander anymore. He was witnessing something deeply wrong. "Please," Elena pleaded, ignoring the crowd, focusing only on the teller. "I need money for my doctor. Just $50. Please help me." "I can't help you if you can't use the machine," Steve said coldly. He started to close his window, indicating that he was done with her. "Next in line, please." "No, wait," Elena cried out. She reached out a trembling hand toward the glass. "Please don't go." Steve turned to his coworker and spoke loud enough for Elena to hear. "I swear, some people just come here to waste our time." "It's pathetic." The word pathetic hung in the air like a heavy stone. Elena lowered her head. She couldn't stop the tears from falling now. They ran down her cheeks, dripping onto her old sweater. She felt small, worthless, and crushed by the weight of their laughter. She fumbled to pick up her card, her hands shaking so badly she knocked her glasses off the counter. They clattered to the floor. The sound of the glasses hitting the ground was the breaking point. Steve didn't offer to help. He just looked at her with a smirk and shook his head. He signaled for security, as if this frail, crying woman was a threat to the bank. "Excuse me?" a voice boomed from the middle of the line. It wasn't a shout, but it carried a weight that cut through the noise of the bank instantly. The chattering stopped. The foot-tapping ceased. Everyone turned to look. Keanu Reeves stepped out of the line. He didn't look like a movie star in that moment. He looked like a man who had seen enough. He adjusted his cap, his jaw set tight, and walked slowly toward the counter. The crowd parted instinctively, recognizing him but also sensing the intensity radiating from him. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't being polite for the cameras. He was genuinely angry. Steve looked up, confused by the sudden silence. He saw Keanu approaching and his eyes went wide for a second, then narrowed in arrogance. He didn't know who Keanu was, or maybe he just didn't care. He just saw another customer he could push around. "Sir, you need to wait your turn," Steve barked into the mic. Keanu ignored him completely. He walked right up to the counter and stood next to Elena, who was sobbing quietly on the floor, trying to find her glasses. He crouched down, his movements slow and deliberate, making himself smaller so he could look her in the eye. "Are you okay?" Keanu asked softly. His voice was gentle, full of a warmth that was missing from the rest of the room. Elena looked up, startled by the sudden kindness. Through her tear-blurred vision, she saw a handsome man with a beard looking at her with concern, not judgment. I can't find my glasses," she choked out. "It's all right," Keanu said. He reached under the counter and picked up the glasses. He wiped them on his own shirt, careful not to scratch the lenses, and gently handed them back to her. "Here you go." He helped her stand up. He didn't rush her. He held her elbow firmly but kindly, supporting her weight until she was steady on her feet again. Then he turned around. The bank was dead silent. Every eye was on him. The security guard was walking over, but he slowed down when he saw Keanu's face. The customers whispered to each other. Realizing that Keanu Reeves was standing in their bank, Keanu turned his attention to the glass partition. He looked directly at Steve. The smile that Keanu was famous for was gone. His face was serious, his eyes dark and intense. He didn't lean in close to the microphone. He spoke clearly, his voice resonating through the quiet lobby. "There is no line that is more important than human dignity," Keanu said, his voice low but commanding. "You don't talk to people like that. You don't treat anyone like that. It doesn't matter how busy you are. It doesn't matter how long it takes. You help her." Steve opened his mouth to argue, to say something rude, but the words caught in his throat. He looked at Keanu, then at the silent crowd, then at the crying woman beside Keanu. The arrogance drained out of his face, replaced by a pale shade of fear and shame. He had never been spoken to like this, especially not in front of everyone. Steve stuttered. You apologize? Keanu said firmly. And then you do your job, which is to help her. The pressure in the room was immense. The other customers, who had been impatient just moments ago, were now nodding in agreement with Keanu. The mood had shifted entirely. The cruelty had been exposed, and no one wanted to be on the side of the bully anymore. Keanu waited. He didn't move. He stood there like a shield between Elena and the rest of the world, making it clear that he wasn't going anywhere until this was made right. The silence stretched on, heavy with anticipation, waiting to see if the bank staff would find their humanity or if they would continue to hide behind their policies and arrogance. The silence that filled the bank was heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. Steve, the bank teller, stood frozen behind the glass. His face was turning a deep shade of red, a mix of embarrassment and anger. He looked at Keanu, then at the crowd of people watching, and finally back at his computer screen as if hoping he could just disappear into the digital numbers. The microphone on his desk was still on, broadcasting every nervous breath he took. Steve's jaw tightened. He didn't want to apologize. His ego was too big, and the feeling of power he had just moments ago was slipping away fast. Instead of doing the right thing, he decided to double down. He leaned into the microphone, his voice shaky but defensive. I was just doing my job, Steve snapped, though he didn't look at Elena. We have policies here. Speed is important. She was holding up the line. I didn't do anything wrong. Keanu didn't shout. He didn't bang his hand on the counter. He just looked at Steve with a calm, steady gaze that was scarier than any yell. You didn't do anything wrong? Keanu asked, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. You mocked a disabled woman. You laughed at her while she cried. That's not a policy. That's just cruel. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. People were nodding. The man in the business suit who had been impatient earlier now looked down at his shoes, ashamed of his own behavior. Just then, a door marked Employees Only swung open near the back of the bank. Out walked a man in a pristine suit. He was older, with slicked-back gray hair and a walk that screamed authority. This was Mr. Grady, the branch manager. He had heard the noise and came out to restore order. Assuming a customer was causing a scene about interest rates or fees. Mr. Grady marched toward the counter, clapping his hands together loudly to break the tension. All right. What is going on here? We have a business to run. Break it up. He stopped when he saw Keanu Reeves standing at the counter. Mr. Grady paused, his eyes widening for a split second. Everyone recognized Keanu, but Mr. Grady was a man who cared more about his own authority than a movie star. He straightened his tie and puffed out his chest. Mr. Reeves, Mr. Grady said, his voice oily and smooth. I'm a big fan. But is there a problem? We can't have scenes in my bank. Keanu turned to the manager. The problem is your teller, Keanu said, pointing a thumb at Steve, and the problem is how you treat your customers. Mr. Grady frowned. He looked at Steve, who was nodding vigorously, trying to get his boss on his side. She was being difficult, boss, Steve lied quickly. She refused to use the machine. She was yelling. Keanu let out a short, disbelieving laugh. She wasn't yelling. She was crying. Because your employee here is a bully. Mr. Grady didn't like being challenged. He felt the eyes of the other customers on him. He needed to show that he was in control. He turned to Elena, who was still standing next to Keanu, clutching her purse and glasses with trembling hands. Ma'am, Mr. Grady said sternly, if you cannot operate the machines or conduct yourself appropriately, perhaps you should come back with a family member. Or use the ATM outside. We cannot have you disrupting the branch like this. It was a shocking thing to say. Elena flinched as if she had been slapped. Her lower lip quivered. I just wanted my money, she whispered. The room went cold. The customers looked at each other in disbelief. The manager had just victim-blamed an elderly disabled woman in front of 50 people. Keanu stepped in front of Elena, blocking Mr. Grady's view of her. The friendly, easygoing actor was gone. He stood tall, his shoulders back, and stared directly into the manager's eyes. "Did you just hear what you said?" Keanu asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "This is a bank. Her money. She's not asking for a favor. She's asking for respect." "And you're threatening to kick her out because she's disabled?" Mr. Grady bristled. He didn't like being lectured. "Sir, I am asking you to step aside. We will handle this customer." Steve helped the next person in line. "No," Keanu said simply. He didn't move. "Excuse me?" Mr. Grady said, his face turning red. "I said no," Keanu repeated, louder this time. "Nobody is moving until this lady is treated like a human being." Mr. Grady lost his temper. He pointed a finger at Keanu. "Sir, I am calling security. If you do not leave, I will have you removed for trespassing." Keanu reached into his pocket. The security guard, a large man who had been standing in the corner watching nervously, stepped forward, hand on his belt. But Keanu wasn't reaching for a weapon. He pulled out his own phone. "Go ahead," Keanu said, unlocking his phone. "Call security. While you're doing that, I'm going to live stream this. I have 3 million followers. I'm sure they'd love to see how your bank bullies old ladies. What do you think the corporate office will say about that?" The threat hung in the air. Mr. Grady froze. He knew exactly who Keanu Reeves was. He knew the power of social media. He knew that a video titled, "Keanu Reeves Kicked Out of Bank for Helping Disabled Woman," would be a disaster for the bank's stock price. Mr. Grady looked at the customers. He saw several of them pulling out their own phones, recording the confrontation. He saw the anger on their faces. He realized he wasn't the hero of this story. He was the villain. "Put the phone away," Mr. Grady said, his voice suddenly much quieter. "Apologize to her," Keanu demanded, "and fire him." Steve's face went white. He looked at his boss with panic. I can't fire him right now," Mr. Grady stammered, sweating. "But I will handle it internally." "Apologize," Keanu said, pointing at Elena. "Now, or I start recording." Mr. Grady swallowed hard. He looked at Elena. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the fear of a man who knows he is beaten. He stepped around the counter and walked up to the partition. It was the most pathetic walk the crowd had ever seen. "Ma'am," Mr. Grady said, his voice tight. I apologize for the misunderstanding." "We value your business." "It wasn't a misunderstanding," Keanu corrected him sharply. "It was cruelty." "Say it like you mean it." "Look at her." Mr. Grady took a deep breath. He actually looked at Elena. He saw the tears on her cheeks, the fear in her eyes. For a second, his conscience maybe poked him. "I am truly sorry," he said with more emotion. "We should have helped you. It was wrong of us." Elena looked at Keanu. He gave her a small, encouraging nod. She sniffled and wiped her eyes. I accept," she said softly. "I just want to go home." "Let her get her money," Keanu told Steve. "And be nice. I'm watching." Steve didn't say a word. He didn't roll his eyes. He didn't sigh. He nodded his head quickly, terrified of losing his job. Elena approached the counter again. This time, her hands were still shaking, but she didn't feel the same heavy weight of dread. She knew that a giant was standing behind her, making sure no one would hurt her. Keanu stood there like a guard. He watched as Steve processed the transaction. The bank was so quiet you could hear the printer printing the receipt. The other customers in the line didn't complain about the wait anymore. They were witnessing a moment of real justice. It wasn't a movie. It was real life. When Steve finally handed the cash to Elena, he actually muttered, "Have a nice day." Elena took the money and turned to Keanu. "Thank you," she whispered. "You didn't have to do that?" Keanu smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. "Yes, I did," he said softly. "Nobody should be treated like that. Are you okay to get home?" "Yes, my son is picking me up outside," she said. "Good," Keanu replied, but Keanu wasn't done with the manager yet. As Elena turned to walk away, Keanu turned back to Mr. Grady. The friendly smile vanished. The crowd leaned in, listening to what he would say next. The humiliation of the staff was complete, but Keanu had one more lesson to teach them before he left. The silence that stretched through the bank lobby was thick and suffocating, but it was a different kind of silence than before. Earlier, the silence had been heavy with tension and the cruelty of the staff. Now, it was heavy with the realization of what had just happened. The air conditioning hummed loudly, the only sound in a room packed with people. Steve, the teller, was staring at his keyboard as if it were a bomb about to go off. He didn't dare look up. He didn't dare make a sound. The arrogance had been completely stripped away. Leaving just a scared young man who knew he had messed up badly, Keanu Reeves stood exactly where he was, his hand still resting gently on the edge of the counter to steady Elena. He watched Mr. Grady, the manager, waiting to see if there was any bit of humanity left in the man. Mr. Grady was sweating now. A small bead of sweat trickled down his temple, ruining his perfect composure. He tugged at his collar, trying to loosen it, feeling the eyes of every single customer in the bank burning into him. "You have a powerful position here," Keanu said, his voice calm but carrying a weight that made Mr. Grady flinch. "You wear a suit. You have a nice office. You control who gets their money and who doesn't. But power without kindness is just bullying." Mr. Grady opened his mouth to speak, to make an excuse or perhaps to offer Keanu a VIP card to smooth things over, but the words died in his throat. He looked at Keanu's eyes and saw that there was no dealing. Keanu wasn't interested in free banking or a meet and greet. He was only interested in justice. "We will review our training," Mr. Grady stammered, his voice weak and trembling. "It's not about training manuals," Keanu said, shaking his head slightly. "It's about looking at someone and seeing a person, not a problem. That woman next to me? She's someone's mother. She's someone's grandmother. She fought through pain just to walk in here. And you made her feel small." Keanu paused, letting the words sink in. "If you can't be kind, you don't deserve to sit in that chair." The honesty of the statement hit Mr. Grady like a physical blow. He looked down at his expensive shoes, unable to handle the guilt washing over him. He felt small now, smaller than he had ever made a customer feel. The security guard stood by the wall, his arms crossed, looking at the manager not with respect, but with disappointment. Slowly, the atmosphere in the room began to shift. The customers, who had been just as impatient as the staff minutes ago, started to realize their own part in the day's events. The man in the business suit looked at his own hands, feeling guilty for having tapped his foot. A woman holding a young child looked at Elena with genuine sympathy. The cruelty had been exposed, and no one wanted to be associated with it anymore. They were seeing the reality of the situation through Keanu's eyes. And they didn't like what they saw. Keanu turned his attention back to Elena. The hard look in his eyes softened instantly, replaced by a warm, protective glow. He saw that she was still shaken, her hands gripping her purse strap so tight her knuckles were white. "You have your money?" Keanu asked her softly, bending down a little so he didn't have to loom over her. Elena nodded, sniffing back the last of her tears. Yes, I have it." "Thank you." "Good," Keanu said, giving her a small, reassuring smile. "Let's get you out of here. The air is stuffy. We could use some fresh air." He gently took her arm, not in a way that controlled her, but in a way that offered support. He didn't rush her. He walked at her pace, matching the slow, shuffling rhythm of her steps. As they moved away from the counter, the crowd parted like the Red Sea to let them pass. No one was complaining about the line anymore. No one was checking their watch. They were watching Keanu Reeves help a stranger. They walked slowly toward the glass doors of the bank. The sound of Keanu's boots and the tap of Elena's cane echoed on the marble floor. They were almost at the exit when Keanu stopped. He looked over his shoulder. The bank was still silent, everyone watching them go. He looked at Mr. Grady one last time. "Be better," Keanu said simply. It wasn't a shout. It was a request. A challenge. Then he turned and pushed the door open. The bell above the door chimed, a cheerful sound that seemed out of place after the emotional heaviness of the last hour. As they stepped outside, the bright California sun hit them. The heat was intense, but it felt real and honest compared to the cold air conditioning of the bank. Elena took a deep breath, the fresh air filling her lungs. She looked up at Keanu, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You're really him, aren't you?" she asked quietly. "People told me you were nice, but I thought they were just saying that because you are famous." Keanu laughed softly, a genuine, rumbling sound. "I'm just a guy, Elena. We are all just people. Some of us just forget that sometimes." He walked her over to a bench near the curb. "You said your son is picking you up?" "Yes, he should be here soon," she said, sitting down with a sigh of relief. Her legs were hurting her after standing for so long. "I don't know how to thank you." "Everyone in there?" "They looked at me like I was garbage." Keanu leaned against the metal pole of a parking sign, crossing his ankles. He looked out at the traffic, then back at her. "You are not garbage. You are brave. It takes courage to go out into the world when the world tries to knock you down. Don't let them win. Your life has value. Your struggle has value." Elena wiped her eyes with a crumpled tissue. "You made them stop. They were so mean, and you just made them stop." "Nobody has the right to treat you that way," Keanu said firmly. "Next time, if someone is rude, you look them in the eye and you say, 'I deserve respect,' and if they don't give it to you, you leave. You walk away with your head held high." As they sat there, a car pulled up to the curb. It was an older sedan, driven by a middle-aged man who looked stressed. He saw Elena sitting on the bench and his face changed from worry to relief. He parked quickly and jumped out. "Mom!" the man shouted, running over. "Are you okay?" "I tried to call the bank, but no one answered." "You were in there so long." Elena stood up, her smile returning now that her son was here. "I am okay now, David. I had a little trouble, but—" She motioned toward Keanu. "This gentleman helped me." David looked at Keanu. He did a double take, his jaw dropping open. He recognized the face immediately. "Wait, you're Keanu Reeves?" Keanu smiled and pushed his hands into his pockets, looking a little shy now that the hero moment was over. "Yeah, hi, your mom had a bit of a rough time with the staff inside. Just wanted to make sure she got out okay." David shook Keanu's hand vigorously. "Thank you. Thank you so much. My mom, she tries so hard to be independent. I worry about her every day. I can't believe they were rude to her." "They were," Keanu nodded. "But they won't forget today. And neither should you. You have a great mom." David helped his mother into the passenger seat of the car. Before he closed the door, he looked back at Keanu. "Do you want me to tell the press? Or post about it? They were terrible to her. We should expose them." Keanu shook his head slowly. "No, let's just leave it be. They know they were wrong. I think that's enough punishment for today. Just take your mom home, get her some tea, and tell her you love her." David smiled, understanding the grace in that decision. "I will, thank you, really." As the car pulled away, Elena waved from the window. Keanu waved back, standing there on the sidewalk until the car was out of sight. The street was busy, people rushing by, living their lives. A few pedestrians recognized Keanu and pulled out their phones to snap a photo, but he didn't pose. He just stood there, looking back at the bank building dot through the glass windows of the bank. He could see Mr. Grady and Steve. They were standing behind the counter, talking frantically, looking worried. They were watching the door, terrified he might come back in. Keanu took a deep breath of the smoggy city air. He hoped they would learn. He hoped the next time an elderly person came in, or someone in a wheelchair, or someone who couldn't speak clearly, they would remember this day. They would remember the feeling of being silenced by a simple truth. He turned his collar up against the sun and began to walk down the street. He didn't want the credit. He didn't want the fame. He just wanted the world to be a little less cruel, one small act at a time. He adjusted his cap and disappeared into the crowd. Just a regular guy again, leaving the bank staff behind to think about the kind of people they wanted to be. The lobby inside remained silent for a long time, the ghost of his kindness lingering like a warning. Keanu Reeves stood on the busy sidewalk for a long time after the car had disappeared around the corner. The sun was beginning to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the pavement. He took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the city air, trying to shake off the lingering tension from the encounter. His heart was still beating a little faster than normal, not from fear, but from the sheer intensity of the injustice he had witnessed. He watched the taillights of Elena's car fade away and felt a sense of relief that she was safe, but a heavy feeling settled in his stomach. He knew that Elena was safe for now, but what about tomorrow? Or next week? What about the next person who walked into that bank alone and vulnerable? He looked back at the large glass doors of the bank. Through the reflection of the street, he could see the scene inside. The customers were moving again, but the energy was completely different. There was no orderly line. There was confusion and agitation. Keanu realized that simply walking away wasn't enough for him. He had told them to be better, but words were easy to forget. He wanted to make sure this lesson stuck. He didn't want to just be a guy who caused a scene and left. He wanted to be the reason things actually changed. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone again. His thumb hovered over the screen for a moment. He could have just called his agent or a lawyer to handle it, but that felt too impersonal. This was about human connection, not a lawsuit. He decided to go back in. The automatic doors slid open with a soft whoosh, and the cool, air-conditioned breeze hit him again. As soon as his boots clicked on the marble floor, the bank went silent for the second time. It was an eerie feeling. Heads snapped up. The man in the business suit stopped complaining to the other teller. The security guard stood up a little straighter. Everyone recognized him, but more than that, everyone remembered what he had just done. They looked at him with a mix of awe and curiosity. Keanu didn't look at the crowd. He kept his eyes forward, walking with a calm, deliberate pace toward the manager's desk, which stood on a raised platform at the side of the lobby. He didn't look at Steve, the teller, who was currently staring at his computer screen with his face buried in his hands. He didn't look at Mr. Grady, who was pacing nervously behind his desk, talking on the phone with a frantic look on his face. Mr. Grady saw Keanu approaching and his face turned pale. He quickly said something into the phone and hung up. He tried to compose himself, smoothing down his suit and forcing a tight, fake smile. "Mr. Reeves," Mr. Grady said, his voice cracking slightly. I thought you had left. Is there something else I can help you with? Perhaps we can open that preferred account for you?" Keanu walked right up to the desk and placed his hands on the edge. He leaned forward, getting into Mr. Grady's personal space, but not in a threatening way, just in a way that demanded attention. "I don't want an account," Keanu said quietly. "And I'm not here for me. I'm here because I need to know that what happened today isn't how you run this place." Mr. Grady swallowed hard. He looked around at the customers who were openly listening to every word. I assure you it was an isolated incident. Steve is usually very efficient. He just had a bad day and—" "No," Keanu cut him off. He shook his head slowly. "Don't blame it on a bad day. We all have bad days. But we don't all bully old ladies. If you treat efficiency as more important than kindness, then this isn't a bank. It's just a factory for money. And I don't want my money or anyone else's money supporting a factory like that." Mr. Grady looked like he wanted to argue. He wanted to defend his employee and his management style, but he couldn't. The truth of Keanu's words was hanging right in front of him, undeniable and heavy. "I understand," Mr. Grady whispered. "I will speak to him. I will discipline him." "You need to do more than that," Keanu said. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small notebook and a pen. He scribbled something down on a piece of paper, his personal email address. He tore the page out and slid it across the desk toward the manager. "I want you to email me," Keanu said, tapping the paper with his finger. "I want to know exactly what you are going to do to fix this. Are you going to train your staff on disability awareness? Are you going to change your policies to help people who need extra time? I want a plan, and I'm going to check on it. Not tomorrow, not next month, soon." Mr. Grady looked at the piece of paper as if it were a legal summons. He was trembling. Being held accountable by a movie star in front of his entire branch was a nightmare scenario. Yes, of course. I will email you." I promise. Good, Keanu said, straightening up. He looked past the manager toward the other employees working in the cubicles behind the glass. And one more thing. He raised his voice slightly so the whole bank could hear. To everyone working here, the next time someone walks in who is struggling, who is slow, or who is confused, remember that person is someone's family. They are fighting a battle you know nothing about. Your job isn't just to move money. Your job is to serve people. Do it with respect. A few of the other tellers who had been watching with wide eyes nodded their heads. One of them, a young woman with glasses, actually whispered, "Okay." Keanu looked at the crowd of customers. He saw the man in the business suit put away his wallet and step out of the line. The man walked over to the desk where Keanu was standing. "You know what?" the man said, his voice loud and clear. "He's right. I saw how you treated that lady. I was in a hurry and I didn't say anything. That was my mistake. But I'm not banking here anymore." The man turned on his heel and walked toward the door. Like dominoes falling, 2 other customers followed him. Then a mother with a stroller. Then an elderly gentleman. "I'm closing my account," the mother said to the teller as she passed. "This is unacceptable," the elderly gentleman mumbled. Mr. Grady stood frozen behind his desk, watching his customers walk out. He wasn't losing just business. He was losing his reputation, and he knew, deep down, that he deserved it. He looked at Keanu, and for the first time, there was real gratitude in his eyes. It was a painful lesson, but maybe it was a necessary one. "You have a good evening, Mr. Reeves," Mr. Grady said softly. He didn't try to stop the customers from leaving. He just let them go. Keanu gave a single, solemn nod. "You too?" He turned and walked back toward the doors. As he exited the bank, he felt the weight on his shoulders lift. He knew the bank staff would have a hard night. They would have to explain to their bosses why they lost customers that day. They would have to look in the mirror and think about who they were. But maybe, just maybe, they would wake up tomorrow and be a little kinder. Outside, the city lights were flickering on. The street lamps cast a yellow glow on the sidewalk. Keanu took off his cap for a moment and ran a hand through his hair. He felt tired, but it was a good kind of tired. It was the feeling you get after doing hard work that actually matters. He began to walk down the street, blending back into the flow of pedestrians. He pulled his hood up, seeking a little bit of anonymity. He didn't want applause. He didn't want people rushing up to him for selfies right now. He just wanted to be Keanu, the guy who helped a friend as he walked past a small coffee shop on the corner. The aroma of roasted beans wafted out onto the street. His stomach gave a small rumble, reminding him that he hadn't eaten in hours. He stopped for a moment, looking in the window. It was a cozy place filled with students and couples. He reached into his pocket to check for cash, ensuring he had enough to buy a coffee and perhaps a sandwich. His fingers brushed against the deposit slip he had been holding earlier. He crumpled it up and tossed it into a trash can near the door. He didn't need the bank today. He had something more valuable than money. He had the memory of Elena's smile when he handed her back her glasses, and the knowledge that he had used his voice to protect someone who couldn't protect herself. Keanu pushed open the door to the coffee shop, a small bell ringing above him. The barista looked up, tired from a long shift, her smile fading as she wiped down the counter. Keanu walked up to the register, pulling his wallet out. He looked at her name tag. "Hi," Keanu said, offering her a warm, genuine smile. "Long day?" The young woman behind the counter looked up at Keanu, her eyes weary and shadowed with fatigue. She had been working for hours, dealing with the after-work rush, and her energy was running on empty. She let out a long, heavy sigh and leaned against the espresso machine. "Yeah, it's been one of those days," she admitted, wiping a stray hair away from her face. "People are just in a hurry, you know. They yell about their drinks being wrong, they spill sugar, and don't clean it up. Sometimes it feels like nobody sees you as a person anymore. You're just a robot making coffee." Keanu nodded slowly, his expression empathetic. He knew exactly what she meant. He had just witnessed that same lack of humanity inside the bank. It seemed to be spreading through the city like a cold wind. "I know what you mean," Keanu said softly. I saw some of that today too. It's hard to keep your chin up when people treat you like you don't matter. The barista managed a small, appreciative smile. She was surprised that a customer was actually listening to her instead of just staring at a phone or demanding service. Well, thanks for listening. Anyway, what can I get for you? Just a black coffee, please, Keanu said. And maybe one of those chocolate muffins if you have any left. Coming right up. As she turned to make the coffee, Keanu watched her move. She was efficient, even though she was tired. He saw her hands, slightly burned from the steam wand, moving with practiced care. He thought about Elena's trembling hands and Steve's impatient tapping. It was the same world, but the attitudes were completely different. When she turned back around and placed the cup and the bag with the muffin on the counter, Keanu handed her his card. She swiped it and handed it back. "Have a good night," she said, her voice already shifting back to the automatic customer service script. Keanu didn't walk away immediately. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a $20 bill. He folded it neatly and placed it in the glass tip jar on the counter. It was a heavy jar filled with coins, but his bill stood out. "For you," he said, meeting her eyes. "Buy yourself something nice after your shift? You're doing a great job. The coffee smells wonderful, and you're handling the rush better than most people would." The barista looked at the bill, then up at him. Her tired eyes suddenly brightened, and a genuine smile broke across her face, a smile that reached her eyes. "Wow, thank you. Seriously, that really means a lot." "It's just a coffee," Keanu said with a modest shrug. "Take care of yourself." He picked up his cup and walked over to a small table near the window. The coffee shop was warm and smelled of roasted beans and sugar. It felt safe. Outside, the city was darkening, the streetlights casting yellow pools of light on the sidewalk. Keanu sat down and took a sip of his coffee. It was hot and bitter, waking him up. He watched the people walking past the window. They were hurrying home, heads down, buried in their own worlds. He wondered how many of them had been rude to someone that day. He wondered how many of them had been kind. He pulled his phone out of his pocket. He had a few notifications, but he ignored them. Instead, he sat back and watched the city breathe. He felt a sense of calm. The anger he felt at the bank had melted away, replaced by a quiet determination. He knew that he couldn't fix every problem in the world. He couldn't stop every bully or help every person who struggled. But he decided, right there at that small wooden table, that he would never stop trying. Even if it was just one person at a time. Meanwhile, across town, Elena was sitting in her small living room. The house was quiet, except for the ticking of a clock on the wall. She was in her favorite armchair, wrapped in a knitted blanket. Her son, David, was in the kitchen making her some tea. Elena held her bank card in her hand, turning it over and over. She looked at it, remembering the terror she had felt just an hour ago. The shame of being laughed at. The feeling of being small. "Mom?" David came in with a steaming mug. He set it down on the coaster. "You okay? You've been staring at that card for 10 minutes? Elena looked up at her son. Her eyes were clear, and the fear was gone. "I was just thinking about that man," she said softly. "Keanu Reeves?" David sat down on the sofa opposite her. "Yeah, that was insane. I still can't believe he was there. It's going to make a great story for the neighbors." Elena smiled gently. "It's not because he is famous, David. That didn't matter. When he stood there, in front of all those people, I didn't feel like a cripple. I didn't feel like a burden. He looked at me like I was important, like I was a queen." David nodded, his expression softening. "He's a good guy. Everyone says that, but today I saw it. It made me realize something," Elena continued, taking a sip of the hot tea. "I let them treat me badly. I let that man behind the counter make me feel small because I felt sorry for myself. But today I felt strong. Not because of me, but because someone stood up for me." "We'll go to a different bank from now on," David said firmly. "I'm going to file a complaint tomorrow." "No," Elena said surprisingly firmly. "Don't do that." "What?" "Mom, they were terrible to you." "I know," Elena said. "But that man, Keanu, he told them to be better. If they listen, maybe the next old lady who walks in there won't be treated like I was." Maybe they learned. Give them a chance to be human. David looked at his mother with newfound respect. She was kinder than he was. She always had been. Back at the coffee shop, Keanu had finished his drink. He stood up and threw his empty cup in the trash. He pulled his hood up, preparing to face the night air again. As he pushed the door open, the cool breeze hit his face. He began the walk to his apartment. It wasn't a long walk, just a few blocks through a neighborhood lined with trees and old brick buildings. He kept his head down, enjoying the anonymity. No one recognized him in the dark, and if they did, they just gave him a nod of respect and let him pass. When he finally walked through his own front door, he was greeted by silence. It was a simple, clean space. Not a mansion filled with gold and statues, but a home filled with books, guitars, and memories. He locked the door behind him and leaned against it. Letting out a long breath, he walked over to a window and looked out at the city skyline. The lights of Los Angeles twinkled in the distance, a vast ocean of stories. Millions of people were living their lives right at that moment, some crying, some laughing, some being cruel, and some being kind. Keanu thought about Mr. Grady, the bank manager. He wondered if the man was still in his office, pacing the floor, worried about his job. He hoped the manager wasn't just scared, but actually thinking. He hoped that tomorrow, when Steve came to work, they would have a real conversation. Not about policies or profits, but about how to treat a neighbor. He thought about Elena, safe at home with her son. He hoped she was drinking her tea and feeling peaceful. Keanu took off his jacket and hung it up. He walked over to his guitar case, opened it, and pulled out his old instrument. He sat down on the edge of the couch and strummed a few chords. The sound was soft and melancholic, filling the quiet room. He didn't feel like a hero. Heroes were people who ran into burning buildings or soldiers who fought for freedom. He was just a man who got lucky in life and decided to share a little bit of that luck. He realized that fame was a strange thing. It gave you a loud voice, but the most important things were said in a whisper, like when he told Elena it would be okay, or when he told the barista she was doing a good job. The world was full of noise. It was full of angry bank tellers, impatient customers, and rushing crowds. But it only took one person to stop the noise. It only took one person to stand in the gap and say, "No more." Keanu played a slow melody, his fingers finding the strings naturally. He closed his eyes. The day had been hard, but it had been a good day. He had made a difference, however small. And as the music filled the apartment, Keanu Reeves found the peace he was looking for, knowing that outside his window the city was a little bit kinder than it had been that morning.